Hello. Dear. My name is Kim Zertucci, and my role is Customer Development Director. I work with Brackus's clients who are interested in our solutions. With me today is Bob Richter, and I'll go ahead and let him introduce himself.
Hi, everybody. I'm Bob Richter. I've been a Sage 100, Mass 90 developer consultant since 1992 and have done various integrations with numerous different products. So that's our big specialty. So, and I've been in the Sage 100 Mass 90 arena for a long time, doing both Sage 100 implementations, training, setup, support, and also on the development side.
Thank you. So who is ROI? So I thought I would just spend a minute and tell you about a little bit about ourselves. We are Sage Gold Master Developers. We are a market leader in Sage 100 integration and automation. So we have been in business for almost 25 years. Our anniversary is in December. And we have over 500 active customers with 1,000+ implementations of our solutions. And we have great references of happy customers. So that's just a little bit of background about us.
One of the things you'll find when doing integrations with us that sort of separate us from other integrators is we work specifically on the Sage 100 side. All of our solutions start from Sage 100, since that's where everybody's going to have their requirements. They're going to need to do things in sales orders or invoices or down to some complicated business process. So we take everything from that aspect. So all of our automations are designed around your existing established Sage 100 processors versus saying we have an integration to some external system and here's how it works with Sage, and now you've got to sort of fit that into your requirements. What this means is that you don't have to give up working business processes in order to achieve automation, and you don't need to settle for compromises when we can deliver all and meet all of your requirement needs.
So our customers come to us with challenges in their business that can be solved with integration. Sometimes we find that one department will implement a solution that helps their department, but it creates a mountain of work for another department. So today we're going to talk about some of those challenges and how IN-SYNCH and ROI can help automate your processes to eliminate these challenges. We'll start with walking you through 4 typical scenarios, and hopefully you may see some relevance to your business challenges. So our first scenario is e-commerce. One of our most prevalent projects start when your marketing team launches a new website, or maybe you expand onto a new marketplace such as Amazon or eBay. The visits to your site are up, your conversions to orders is spiking, revenue is up, the executives are happy, but then
what happens is now you've got hopefully hundreds of orders that are supposed to be coming into Sage 100 and are not. Calls to customer service are now increasing because now you've got this volume of new orders. Where is it? I want to make a change. I need to cancel it. I need to add to it. What's the status? How is it shipping? Customers are looking for, did it ship? Are there tracking? Is there tracking information? Again, what's the status? Potentially you have inventory issues where now, because you've got this, this new e-commerce channel of orders, that inventory items are now overselling or could be overselling because obviously now there's this new channel. Another concern could be that if you have different versions of customers, meaning a reseller or a distributor and end users on the system, you could end up with people seeing pricing on the website that would be different than if they called up and ordered the same exact part number. There could be many more that I'm not covering, but those are just some of the simple, the most common issues that we see with now a new e-commerce initiative is set up, and suddenly there are now these challenges. So what we do is in this example is we would set up one of our typical shopping cart integrations, where it could be orders coming in and inventory going out and special pricing maybe. But I'm always going to go back to the fact that we're Sage 100 centric, right? Everything's going to come from the Sage 100 aspect. So what I'll do is use some examples, specific examples of companies that we work with where it was, that the basic shopping cart or solution was 10% of what they needed. The remaining 90% were just curveballs that they were throwing at us. Okay. One company was in the dental supply industry, and they said they had set up a web store using a very common platform, and they needed, to start with, they needed orders coming in, they needed inventory numbers going out, quantity availability, they needed to create new customers, they needed inventory attributes, name, product lines, and things like that, some categories. Like I said, inventory quantity, they needed some specific pricing. That's where it started. Then what it turned into is they had an add-on for this shopping cart that allowed the shopping cart to present a portal to the customers. So now what they needed was to be able to show their customers their open receivables, their payments, their order history, their invoice history for all their shipments, and ongoing order payments that happen. So for instance, if they logged in and had $1,000 order and they knew they paid 2 $100 checks towards it, they wanted to be able to see that. They also wanted to be able to update their contact information or customer information, have that come back to the system. They also wanted to be able to select an invoice and pay it online, where they're not even, in this case, they were using a Sage integrated payment processor, but we have another user using a different version of that where it's integrated to a payment processor, but they don't have any integration in Sage 100 with that credit card processor. So they want to be able to pay those invoices. They also need to have order updates, changes, invoice adjustments, payments, et cetera, that are happening in Sage, whether it comes from the website or not, be reflected on this portal. What they also had, because it was the industry, was that almost every one of their items that was on that are on the website have variants, and the variants can be not just simple, large, small, or medium, but they can also be under different categorizations, different material, by different vendors, for different uses, even though it's the same kind of product. And so what we ended up having to do was sync out all of their information, which they created user-defined tables to contain all of that tracking, categorization information and variant information, and put all that together. And on top of that, when they made a change to one of those variant pieces of data, it had to go back to the website and then re-update that item, take it out of categories, et cetera. So this was an example of where what started out as a regular old integration to a website turned into, throwing curveballs at us left, right, up, and down. And so what we ended up doing was we set up exactly everything that they needed. So the portal sends in customer updates, contact updates from the website. That pulls into Sage, updates the customers, updates the contacts, create new ones. Sends out the customer and contact updates and order history, invoice history, and payment information, not only to the shopping cart, but to the add-on also. And on the add-on, they're allowed to, like I said earlier, make payments. And so those payments come in as cash receipts. And so we'll automatically create cash receipts for those payments and have them come into Sage, whether it's credit card payments that already were done or not, like I had previously mentioned. And then we also set up integrations to the shopping cart, directly to the shopping cart with the inventory to handle all the different variants and all of that processing. So that they're up and running, and that one turned out as a great example of what started out as a sort of basic shopping cart integration to the basic part of it was only about 10% of the requirements.
So now we have another scenario where the sales department implements a new CRM. They're excited. They're going to get to start tracking their customers, and they want to track their customers' buying habits. But then what happens?
Okay, with a CRM integrated with Sage, a number of things can happen with that. Number one is the expensive, high-powered CRM that you have could turn into a glorified Rolodex, and that's all it does. And I'm speaking this as an example of a customer we had who tried to set this up. What they did was they had a popular CRM but with no integration, and all it became was something that had 30% of the customer contacts or phone numbers that certain people needed. None of the information with Sage was going out. None of the information was coming back. They were the ones where they required the customers to be in Sage and the customers were to be in the CRM became, everything was duplicate entry, et cetera. So that could happen. It could be a glorified Rolodex. We could also look at, they have a CRM system. So this is another example of someone I'm going to use what their requirements were, where they had a CRM, which basically was going to hold customer information. Well, what they wanted to do is they wanted to have their customer service reps work only in the CRM. And so what their job was to have that CRM be, that's their go-to when the customer calls up and says, I'm such and such, they can call that customer record up. They could ask, what do I owe you? What's the status of order number one? What's the pricing of a specific item number? Do you have any widgets available because I want to place an order for those? You know, what's the status of some of these invoices? What did I order before? Because I don't remember the part, I want to order it again, etc. They had a very complex system of shipments and shipping and ordering that we had also integrated, but it worked with a picking system. So they were not going to have their CRM be order entry because it would not have worked, because they have a whole different process of order entry that has to go through a specific use. So what we did with that system is we linked up not only customers and contact synchronization bi-directional, so they could go to the CRM, make an update, change someone's phone number, email, add another contact, have that come back in Sage. But they also wanted to make sure that the CRM had order history, invoice history, open receivables, payments, and inventory items and inventory quantity availability. So that way their reps could say, yes, we have widgets, there are 10 available, the price is X, here's what you owe, any of those questions. And on top of it, the CRM that they wanted, because of their requirements, were pretty Sage-centric. Some of the CRM requirements had to be customized by their CRM developer, who had to add some custom objects to the CRM, so they weren't even available on the initial go-through with their API documentation. So we had to build on top of building our integration to that CRM, build it into some custom CRM objects also.
All right, so another popular third scenario that we were going to cover today is when the warehouse decides to outsource fulfillment to a 3PL. So your company is growing, you're outgrowing your warehouse, you need to utilize the resources of a 3PL, and it can help you achieve many of your corporate objectives. It streamlines the processes, frees up resources in the warehouse, and saves you valuable space. But then,
okay, so in this example, I'm going to use a specific customer of ours who they're the Sage user. They needed to go to a specific 3PL to do all of their inventory handling. So what they had was they brought in a 3PL system to be able to do a number of different things. They needed to get that 3PL system sales orders so that every sales order that was going to be shipped from that warehouse got shipped to the correct location, and they knew about it. Every purchase order that they entered in Sage was able to get to that, again, get to their system. And so that when the truck showed up and dropped off all the items, they knew where it was to go. And then the 3PL system also needed to be able to let the user know, the Sage user know when, let's say they dropped a box of, glass widgets, right? There's now 12 less, things like that. Or if they just need to do a cycle count or what have you. And so you can imagine all of that information now that they've got this 3PL, that needs to be entered somewhere. Because without the 3PL knowing what sales orders need to be shipped, or without notifying the Sage user, what did we ship, or same thing on the purchase and receiving side, it doesn't really do much. So in this example, what the user had done was worked with the 3PL system to create a Sage integration, and they were able to set up a Sage integration, and I'm doing finger quotes, Sage, A. And what they had done was created a number of integrations to the various Sage pieces. And what the end user found out was, because the lack of Sage experience by the 3PL was causing numerous problems, and I'll get into some of those as some examples. So what they did was, we were already integrating a number of websites. I think we had about 3 or 4 different channels of information, 2 different websites and an Amazon already on their system. What they had done was they came to us and said, can you help us with this 3PL? And so we started going through the requirements. And during the requirements, the first thing that came up was once they send sales orders out, some of their sales orders were small, 1, 2, 3 lines. Some of the sales orders were for some of their stores, which had upward from 80 to 90 lines on them. And so what would happen is the 3PL would start shipping things and start sending information over to Sage saying, we shipped 10 widgets on order number 1. 15 minutes later, we're shipping 10 of different widgets on order number 1. And then a few minutes later, we're shipping 15 of the other item on order number 1. And what they ran face first into was the fact that in Sage 100, you can't create new invoices or shipments for an existing order unless you're updating it. And so that was a showstopper for them. We just started asking while during the requirements analysis was, when you get a shipment back from the 3PL, is it the complete shipment, or are they shipping the data all day long? And there were groans, and everyone said, yeah, they ship it all day long. And I go, okay, so you just want us to merge it into the existing shipment, which would be a basic question, knowing how Sage works. And immediately they were all perked up like, oh, you can do that. That's a nightmare for us. And it was basic stuff. It was just some, coming from our vantage point of doing everything the way Sage works, that naturally would be a question or a hurdle to make sure we handled, which we had multiple options for. So we ended up, we're setting up an integration for them currently that's in the process right now, where we're pushing out sales orders that need to go. We're pulling in shipments all day long, merging them onto existing shipments. We're pushing up purchase orders. We're pulling in receipts. These people want the receipts to be merged into an existing receipt, even though Sage will allow you to have multiple receipts against different purchase orders at the same time. And we're doing inventory transactions, which was another thing that they had brought up. The 3PL was trying to do send in from these cycle counts back to inventory physical count entry, which periodically, for them, that was a big problem. It shouldn't have gone that way. They just needed to do inventory transactions, because number one is physical inventory can just be a bear to make sure that everybody, when you freeze everything and just handling that. The other option is they didn't know the count. They were actually just saying, we're sending over the fact that you have 2 less. So they were back into figuring out the counts, and sometimes they were off. So it was never working anyway. So we're doing it, we're importing it into inventory transaction entry, which once that's done for them, it's going to be a night and day difference. It, just completely allows them to handle all of those challenges.
Okay, so we've talked through 3 challenges so far, and now we're on to our 4th, where, as we've depicted, our solution can expand to the user's requirements. So now we have a situation where company is growing such that they're actually creating additional companies within Sage 100. So, we've got this established distribution or fulfillment company that decided to launch an e-com site, but they said, hey, let's put that e-com site in a new company in Sage for accounting purposes. We want to segregate that. So that company takes the e-com orders, but the parent company is going to fulfill the orders. So, Bob, what are some of the challenges there?
So now, when we do this, so we have a sort of an add-on to our integration to handle these, we call intercompany processing. What we find is that users say, just like Kim said, we've got a company that does e-commerce orders or does the sales orders for a specific line of inventory or something, but they don't contain any inventory, and they don't fulfill or ship anything. They get it from their parent company. And so what they do is they, on their end, since they're doing this manually, what they end up doing is the minimum required information to get these transactions to make sure that they're accounted for. And so what they want to do is they come to us and say, well, can you automate that? We say, since it is automatic, it doesn't really matter to do the minimum. Why not do it the way you'd really want to do it? And so normally, or not normally, but typically what we'll see is someone to say, okay, so if we really want to make sure we track all of this and handle all of this in the Sage system, what we would do is, and I'm going to call company A, just to keep the discussion easy. Company A is the company that receives the orders, and company B is the parent company that's doing all the fulfillment. Is that company A is receiving all these orders, and what they would want is they would want to have someone manually create a purchase order in company A for company B. The vendor becomes company B. Once that purchase order is created manually, so that's one manual entry, company B then would create a sales order. So that sales order in company B would be a sales order for company B from company A as the customer. That's the second point of manual entry. Then company B ships and fulfills the order and sends it. Now, we have companies where company B acts like a drop shipper. They just get the order in and they ship it right to the customer. We also have companies who, because they want to see it all on the books, they have company B ship it, and really it's just a shipment to that invoice, and it's not a drop ship, and it goes back over to company B. And essentially, from the shipping perspective, it's the same thing. It's, what do we do with it? So that's a manual process, or that's however they want to do it. They ship it using whatever software they're doing, that they're using. Then they update that invoice, and during the update, we then message the other company through the integration. What they would want to do is then, once that invoice was shipped and done and completed, go back over to company A again and receive that purchase order, either do a receipt of goods, possibly with an invoice, or just do a receipt of invoice if they're drop shipping. And they would also want to invoice that sales order. So there's 2 more manual entry points. So at the start of this, there's once the order is created in Sage, that generates 5 manual processes for every single order. So what we end up doing is we step in and we set up an integration that once that order gets created in Sage, we automatically create the purchase order. And that purchase order could be an exact copy of it, and we bring over the customer's address and the exact same item numbers. We've also done it where the user has it set up so that it's only part of inventory. We go check to see if that inventory item is available in company A, and if it is, don't intercompany it, just go get the stuff that's not available. But anyway, then we create an automatic purchase order in Sage for the other company. And then once that purchase order is created, we automatically create a sales order in company B. So that eliminates, so far we've automated 2 of the steps. They go and ship it in company B, because 99% of these, so far 100%, don't want to automate that because they do it themselves in their own way. they ship, pack, and pick it, send it to the customer, or however it's going to work. What we do is then once we see that those invoices have been updated, we send messages back to the other company, to company A, automatically do the purchase order, receipt of goods, or receipt of invoice, and automatically do the sales order invoicing to ship it. So out of the 5 steps for every order, we've automated 4 of them, and it just automatically happens in the background.
So, are you facing any of these challenges that we just discussed? Are you searching for a solution? We've implemented solutions for each one of these challenges, as Bob outlined, numerous times. So now let's talk about the tools in our toolkit that make up our solution and how we can help. So our primary tool is our module called IN-SYNCH. IN-SYNCH is the most used tool in our tool set, and it's a module that actually gets installed within your Sage 100 system. It automates these manual processes that we talked about, and it does so real time. It's customizable and flexible for high-end complex integrations. Like Bob mentioned, it can do some transformation logic that other solutions may not be able to do. It's highly secure and efficient in its data transfers. High volume is no problem. And as we outlined, we support multiple platforms: e-commerce, marketplaces, 3PLs, credit card processing channels, and more. So now Bob will review some of the other tools that work in conjunction with the IN-SYNCH module.
So like I said earlier, one of the things that we do is when we listen to the user who, you're going to come to us and say, here's what we would like to be able to do. Here's what we would like to integrate with. We're not going to come up with we've done an integration to that and here's what it is, and let's hope it does somewhat close to 100% of what you need. We'll construct the system, the integration, to do whatever it needs to accomplish 100% of your needs, as long as it's doable. So what we do is we come up with how we can do this, and we'll have scenarios where we've got multiple solutions in place for a single user. That's fairly common. So one of them I have, where we have custom connectors to your third-party solutions. So one of our most common way is we have our IN-SYNCH module, which is a module that lives inside of Sage 100. And it's part of the solution. What it does is synchronize data back and forth between it and a staging database. That staging database really is a repository of data, and it allows to keep any external system separate from your internal system. And then what we would do is we would set up a second piece, which is our connector, that would talk to whatever third-party solution you have available. In almost all of the examples I gave, we were using that scenario where it was the connector to the shopping cart. It was the connector to the CRM. It was the connector to the third-party warehousing system. So in that example, it's that first one, custom connector, where we sync data out of Sage, we set up a connector and talk to the external system, and then those two are passing off data back and forth. The other option would be where what we would do is set up some API endpoints where your developer or you or whomever, if it's the third-party developer, if it's your internal development system, what we would do is stand up some API endpoints where your system or this external system would say, I have an order and I want to give it to Sage. Instead of us asking for it, the third-party system wants to send that information to Sage and say, here is an order. Give me inventory availability for an item that someone's looking at. Give me pricing. Give me a list of items. So it's not us asking or pushing. It's the external system asking or pushing. We have numerous endpoints that we could set up, which allows for that third-party system to talk to Sage and it doing all of the pushing and pulling, or the requesting and putting. We also do we call it a do-it-yourself, meaning you have let's say you have an external system, or you have an internal developer, or you have a development company that's done your website who says, we can do all the connection information, we just need the data. And so what we would do is set up our IN-SYNCH module, work with the developer and say, here's what the staging database needs to look like, and here's the data you would need to get and work with. So we're not doing any of the work on the external system side. We're just doing it, making sure we get the data out of Sage, get the data into Sage, and they're doing the rest. And we can work with them so that they don't have to become Sage experts just to do their job. They use us as how do we do X? Where does the data live? How does it live? And then the last example on here, which is quite common, we'll set up something where the user, and that was using in my one example where I said we were integrating to a shopping cart, and that shopping cart had an add-on that was a portal that allowed for cash receipts and open receivables. So what their system did was the only way that they could do that was moving files, text files back and forth. And these text files were JSON format, which is just another formatting of a text file. It could just be a simple CSV, could be XML, could be CXML, could be whatever, where we're just taking flat files and the external system says, that's the only way I want to do it, or we have some format that will send you, and then they drop it into a folder or FTP site. We can set up some automated FTP processes where we move data back and forth, and we monitor a folder in your Sage system. Suddenly we see files there, grab them, parse them, import them, and then do the reverse going out. Maybe we're creating CSV files for shipments or orders or customers or inventory, and we do the same thing every 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 1 hour, whatever. We log things that are being changed, and then on that timer, instantly create a CSV file or XML file that says, here are the items that changed since the last time. That's the key thing. If you've got 150,000 inventory items, we don't want to send 150,000 inventory items every 1 hour. We just want to send the changes that have happened. So we'll do that. That's an example, and that's quite common.
So far, we've talked about highly customized technical solutions, but we don't want to lose sight of the fact that at the same time, we can also perform much simpler integrations. These are a few of our most popular website platforms that we work with. They can typically handle just about any integration point that our customers request with Sage 100. If you start with us before you commit to a platform, we can help guide you. Our pre-built connectors allow for the following: repetitive turnkey implementations, fixed fee pricing with no monthly or data charges, complex integrations when required, and unlimited database and shopping carts. Or like we discussed, maybe you don't want to go through a website development project, but you just want to take advantage of the high volume of traffic that marketplaces produce for their merchants. So you can launch a marketplace store. These 3 marketplaces are very popular with our customers. We can bring in orders to sales orders, or we can send directly to invoices for fulfilled orders. Orders can go to a single customer, or they can go to individual customers within your Sage 100. We can do real-time orders. We could do a daily batch or a monthly batch. Depends on your requirements. And of course, we can also send the tracking numbers back to the marketplace. We can send them from invoice data entry, UDFs, or any other shipping solution that works with Sage.
Just a little about the CRM integrations. I spoke about that earlier. About one of the things, some of the examples that we've done. The examples that I spoke about, 2 of them were Salesforce and HubSpot. HubSpot was the one that we did the extensive integration, where we're pushing orders, tracking orders, order history, item numbers, quantities, prices, invoices, customers, contacts, open receivables, payments, to that one. With Salesforce, we've done some simple versions where it was just pushing out customers and contacts, so that it wasn't that just glorified Rolodex, so that it was something useful, but just did only contain customer information. We're doing a Zoho CRM right now that's in the start, but it has begun. But that one, they've got numerous requirements. Their initial requirement was somewhat basic, but I have a feeling that one's going to turn into something. The point being is that they're very scalable. So a CRM integration could be soup to nuts, like the one that I brought up earlier, or it could just be maybe the CRM just needs to be an advanced version of a Rolodex. But again, it's very flexible, and these are some of the examples.
So I think you can see from the examples that we have talked about that there's many types of data integration that our Sage customers need. And we still get requests for new imports and integrations that we've never done before. So if you haven't seen what you needed so far today, please ask us about it, because it's highly likely that we can assist. Another unique thing that we can help with is reconciling financial reports. Some examples that we've done with customers are the Amazon settlement report that comes out after you've, a monthly report as you're shipping items. It has the fees and transactions that Amazon charges and the returns, etc. Or maybe a Shopify payment report. We can work with you to define the various transactions that occur each month on those reports. And then we create the appropriate transaction in Sage 100. For example, a cash receipt, a vendor invoice, a general ledger entry. Typically, other integrators cannot get that deep of access to these Sage objects.
So just in terms of what Kim had just mentioned, some of the advantages with the way that we do things is just that, is the way we do things, right? So the way we approach these, any solution, is to first get the requirements that the user needs from the Sage 100 perspective. What we don't want to do is we don't want to say you have an integration to Salesforce, let's say, or you need an integration to Salesforce, and we say we did an integration for Salesforce, and what it does is it syncs customers back and forth bi-directionally, and that's it. And for some of you that may work, for some that may do nothing, because your customer base is contact intensive, and so pushing the fact that you have big giant customer C100 to Salesforce doesn't mean anything, because big giant customer in Sage has 157 contacts that all have their own email addresses and information needed. So we approach it from, what do you need in Sage 100? How is that going to work? What are your processes? And then we do it that way. And then we come up with, what tools are we going to need? How are we going to build this? Is it going to be something that we need, in the example earlier, where we need to do our integration with a connector, and on top of it, stand up an API endpoint that someone can send a sales order to. And in addition, do some XML file feeds, because they have different version of, an existing website that, they have a different set of users who are not going to use that and want to submit orders and get back shipments as, a CSV file, or something like that. So we're going to make it work that way. One of the other reasons is because, again, the fact that we're working inside of Sage, when we're moving data back and forth, we're going to do it where we're only going to push data that needs to be changed. So there's a lot of companies that we ran into this recently, where their system would go out and grab all of their inventory items. They had about 65,000 inventory items, so it wasn't terribly large, but it was not small. 65,000 inventory items is not, a little bit of data, especially when they had a couple of warehouses. And so their system would go out and try to grab all of the inventory and all of the items and all the warehouse information. And they can only do it once a day because they had so much data. Getting that information and bringing it over to the website was only feasible when they did that once a day. Well, when we set our stuff in, it was like, well, why? Who cares that you've got 65,000 items? If during noon till 1, 100 items get changed or 100 quantity availability records change, why not just sync the 100 that changed? We don't care about the rest. Neither does the website. The website doesn't need to know that a widget went from quantity available went from 2 to 2. The other option is, or the other point here is that the system is secure, meaning we're never at any point is any external system accessing your Sage 100 system. You can have a firewall that completely limits external or inbound traffic, just completely cut off. That's not going to affect our solution in any way, shape, or form. Our system, all of the processing of external data is happening outside of your system, with the exception of doing the FTP, automated FTP piece. But again, you're still not allowing some external system in. But all of the external processing is handled between the third-party system and the connector or the API. Our system in Sage reaches out and grabs data from the external database, external system, whatever it is that we're doing, and pulls it into Sage or pushes it out. There's never anything allowed in from the outside in. There's open options for other solution integration. So, when we do one of these, it's not we're setting up Salesforce and that's it. Now, if you want to go some other route, we have to start from scratch and build an entire solution from 0 to 100 to do it for Amazon, to do it for another website, to do it for a different 3PL, et cetera. We're going to leverage what we've got. So our module and Sage stays the same. And then we just point our connector out to another website and talk to it, or we set up a CSV integration on top of what you've already got so that it's just working in conjunction along with that. So the other option is that, like I said, I've said numerous times in here, these projects are very scalable. So we can do a simple, as Kim mentioned in the slide before, a WooCommerce integration where we set it up to do inbound orders and outbound inventory items, and that's the end of it. Or we could do something as we get to doing automated FTP, set up a couple of API endpoints, dealing with a CRM solution, as well as a website integration. The website integration could consist of 2 different websites going to 2 different companies, et cetera. So, we welcome curveballs is my point.
Okay, so you might ask, why should I work with ROI? Well, we've been in the Sage ecosystem for 25 years, and we're trusted by Sage partners, such as Rackus. We have an engineer that is involved in every project to define the project up front and understand the requirements needed for your implementation. So you get an engineer's perspective versus a salesperson that may just overpromise and tell you that something can be done when it can't. We act as an extension of your Sage partner team with our extensive Sage 100 focus. And as we've mentioned, we've been doing this for a long time, so you'll benefit from our experience with Sage and the various e-com platforms and marketplaces. Our solutions are strong, a good value, and require a limited amount of support once they're set up and configured. We don't charge monthly fees or transaction fees as some of the other solutions do. And we have happy customers that are willing to be references, a couple of which are on this call.
And so just to go over, if you were, how to go about, or how we go about doing some of these projects, is first we would meet with a discovery call, where the goal of that call is to come up with what is it that you need from Sage? What do you want to do in Sage? What do you want to integrate to the external system? And so that's going to, at the end of that call, we'll be able to say, we have a scope to put together and get a proposal to you. That scope is going to be a bulleted list of what did we hear you say you needed, and in detail, so that we could basically look at that and say, these are all the things we're going to do. And then once approved, then we would send you over a requirement questionnaire to get some fill in the blanks of when we're, for instance, bringing in a Sage 100 sales order, and we want to know what warehouses do you want to use, or payment types, or terms codes, or tax schedules, things like that. Various credentials to get to the website, things like that. Once that's kicked off, then we set up our modules, start building the mappings, customizing, get you testing, bringing in orders, pushing out whatever's needed. And then we get to the point where you've said, everything looks good. We've tested it fully. We've seen it do all of the things we needed to do. Let's go live, schedule to go live, turn everything on. Again, just to mention, we do all of this in a test company in Sage. So we're not ever going to touch your live company until you say we're ready to go live. Then we schedule go live, move it all into the live company, turn it on, and it's off and running. And we can do that with multiple integrations. So we have, examples where customers are bringing in 5, 6 integrations. We stage it and test, move it over to live, and add it to live. So now live has 2. And then if we do a third, merge it into, once it's gone live. Then it would be what's next. What projects would be next? That's it for our presentation here and what we've gone over. So now what we can do is, if anybody's got any questions or comments, you can use the chat.
I think you can also feel free to unmute yourself and just have a conversation as well.
Anybody have anything?
So Bob, why don't you talk about, what versions can we support? Do you have to be on a Sage supported version, 2021 or 2020?
No, we support back to version 4.4 of Sage and anything in between. And then doing an upgrade 99% of the time is not a big deal. Most of the time, the website doesn't really care that you're on version 2013 of Sage and you're going to upgrade to 2018, because an order's still an order, an item's still an item, and an order has items ordered for customers who need it shipped to somewhere. And that hasn't changed on Sage since its inception.
If I was going to do an upgrade, how long does it take for your solution to come up to the current version of Sage after Sage does a release?
We get our source code from Sage when they're coming up to the current version, or they're releasing a new version. So for instance, 2021, I'll use that as an example. For version 2021, we didn't get the final version of the Sage 2021 until right before it was available for the users. So we can't successfully upgrade our stuff until we have the version that's going to be released. So normally it's going to be once we have the final version, meaning when Sage has the final version, usually within a month or so after that. Also has a lot depending on what Sage does with that version. If they make a giant change to their code base or new functionality, that's going to have some sort of impact on how we're upgrading what we need to change in our system. But it's usually within a month after Sage releases it that we can have it up and going.
That's great. So we're looking to create a new website. Does ROI design websites?
Our focus is the integration underneath. So we don't design websites specifically here. We work with a number of companies that are website development sources that they strictly, if you had nothing available or no website in place and needed to do a full-blown BigCommerce integration or WooCommerce integration, we would work with one of our partners who do that for their piece. They specialize in just that website and doing all of the graphics, all of the functionality, and all of the processes and making sure the website does all that. We connect Sage to that existing website.
Great. Any other questions from anybody? Well, we would like to thank you for joining our session. I hope you found it informative. And if you have any follow-up questions, please reach out to us and